Look at a packet of seeds in late spring. To some people, it's just a small paper envelope. To a gardener, it's a countdown clock. Because the biggest mistake in summer gardening usually isn't what people plant, it's when they plant it. Every year, thousands of gardeners wait a little too long. They plan, they think about starting. They tell themselves, next weekend. And then June arrives, temperatures rise, and the best planting window is already closing. That's when small delays become smaller harvests. Today, we're counting down 15 vegetables you should plant before June if you want a stronger summer garden. Some can feed you within weeks. Some need a head start right now to produce before fall. And I saved one at number 5 because beginners delay it every single year. While number 1 can turn one summer into an unforgettable harvest if you start before the window closes. At number 15, we have radish. If you are late to the season, radishes forgive you. That alone makes them powerful. Most vegetables punish hesitation. Radishes move fast enough to make up for lost time. Many varieties are ready in under a month, which means planting before June can still put fresh food on your table quickly. That speed matters because fast results keep people engaged. When someone sees food emerge within a few weeks, they stop treating gardening as a someday project. Another reason radishes belong here is flexibility. They fit between slower crops, in containers, raised beds, narrow rows. They turn empty corners into food. And while most people focus on the root, the greens are edible too. That means one planting can provide more than expected. But the real value of radishes is momentum. Plant them now, and they create the first harvest while the rest of the garden is still developing. That first success often determines whether people stay committed through the season. Small crop, huge psychological payoff. At number 14, we have lettuce. Many gardeners assume late spring means lettuce is already finished. That's not entirely true. Planting before June still gives you time, especially with loose leaf varieties that mature quickly. Another reason it belongs on this list is harvest style. You don't need to wait for a full head. You can begin taking outer leaves early and let the center continue growing. That turns one planting into repeated meals. Salads, sandwiches, wraps. Fresh greens when grocery prices keep rising. But timing matters. Once summer heat intensifies, lettuce can bolt quickly. That's why planting before June is the difference between weeks of fresh harvest and a missed season. Another advantage is accessibility. It grows in containers, patio boxes, and small spaces. That means even renters can use the timing window. A few days may not seem important, but in gardening, those few days can decide whether a crop thrives or struggles. Lettuce proves that timing is often more important than space. At number 13, we have bush bean. This is where the summer garden starts becoming practical. Bush beans are fast enough to reward you early, but productive enough to matter all season. Planting before June gives them a strong start before peak heat arrives. That matters because once beans begin producing, regular picking often encourages even more pods. The plant responds to harvest by making more. Another reason bush beans belong here is food value. They are not just garnish. They become side dishes, soups, stir-fries, preserved food. And if allowed to mature fully, some varieties become dry beans that store for months. One crop, two uses. Fresh now, stored later. That's why serious gardeners value them. They work in beds and containers, and they produce in a way that feels rewarding fast. A row of beans often looks modest at first, but once the pods start appearing, people realize how productive a small area can be. Planting before June gives that process enough runway to become meaningful. At number 12, we have beet. Most people think of beets as just roots, but planting them before June gives you two harvests from the same space. First, the greens, then the roots. That makes them much more efficient than many people realize. Beet greens can be harvested young and cooked like spinach, giving food before the roots mature. That early yield matters. It makes the garden productive sooner. Another reason beets belong here is resilience. They handle fluctuating spring weather well and still establish before full summer heat. But once temperatures climb too far, quality can decline. That's why the calendar matters. Start before June, and they have enough time to develop strong roots while conditions remain favorable. Another reason beets stand out is storage. The harvested roots last much longer than many fresh vegetables. That extends the value of the planting beyond the season. They are one of the smartest examples of using timing to multiply what a small garden can do. Miss the window, and the season gets harder. Catch it, and the same bed starts producing in two different ways. At number 11, we have Swiss chard. If there's one vegetable that forgives weather better than most, it's Swiss chard. Plant it before June, and it often carries you through much of summer. That's what makes it such a strong transition crop. It establishes in milder temperatures, then keeps producing when heat arrives. Another reason it matters is repeated harvest. Cut the outer leaves, and the center continues growing. That means the same plant can keep feeding you for months. Unlike many greens that fade when summer intensifies, Swiss chard often holds its ground. That makes it especially valuable when other crops are slowing down. The leaves are large, the stems are edible, and a few plants can provide much more food than they appear to. But the real lesson is this. Some crops are not just about what you plant. They are about when they get established. Start Swiss chard before June, and it has time to build strength before the hardest heat. Wait too long, and the same crop works harder to catch up. Timing changes everything. At number 10, we have cucumber. Summer doesn't feel complete without cucumbers, but the biggest mistake people make is starting them too late. Cucumbers love warmth, but they also need enough season left to climb, flower, and produce heavily. Planting before June gives them that runway. Another reason cucumbers matter is speed once established. They often go from vines to fruit surprisingly fast. Then they don't stop. One healthy plant can produce far more than beginners expect. Fresh slicing cucumbers, pickling cucumbers, snacks straight from the vine. Once they begin, the harvest feels constant. But cucumbers are unforgiving about delays. Lose a few key weeks, and you shorten the most productive part of their season. That's why experienced gardeners push them early enough to establish before true summer stress. They don't just plant for warmth, they plant for momentum. And when a trellis fills with fruit by mid-season, that early start becomes obvious. At number 9, we have zucchini. If you have ever grown zucchini successfully, you know one plant can become a problem, in the best way. It starts quietly, a few leaves, small blossoms. Then suddenly the harvest begins and seems endless. But that only happens if it gets enough time to establish. Planting before June gives zucchini the head start it needs to hit peak production during summer. Another reason it belongs here is efficiency. One plant can feed a household if managed well. Fresh cooking, baking, grilling, freezing. It's one of the few crops that can overwhelm a kitchen, but only if you start early enough. Another reason it matters is speed. Compared with larger squash crops, zucchini rewards you quickly. That fast feedback keeps people engaged. The first fruit often appears sooner than expected, and then the plant accelerates. Miss the window, and you reduce that peak. Start now, and you can spend the hottest part of summer trying to keep up with harvest. At number 8, we have sweet corn. This is where the garden starts feeling larger than itself, because corn changes the scale. It's not just vegetables anymore. It becomes calories, real summer food. But corn needs time. It grows upward before it produces, and that means every week matters. Planting before June gives the crop enough season to mature before weather shifts later in the year. Another reason corn belongs here is timing synchronization. Many varieties depend on pollination happening during active summer conditions. Delay planting too much, and you compress the season. That often means smaller ears and weaker yield. But when started on time, corn becomes one of the most satisfying crops in the garden. Watching stalks rise, tassels form, ears develop, it changes how a backyard feels. It no longer looks decorative. It looks productive. And that matters, because some crops are emotional as much as practical. Corn makes a space feel abundant, but only if it starts before the clock moves past it. At number 7, we have bell pepper. This is one of the crops beginners almost always delay. They see warm weather and assume there's plenty of time. But peppers grow slower than people expect. They need warm soil, yes, but they also need a long stretch to build roots, flower, and mature fruit. Planting before June gives them the extra runway that makes all the difference. Another reason bell peppers belong here is value. Grocery prices for quality peppers can be surprisingly high, especially organic ones. A few healthy plants can replace repeated purchases all summer. but only if they get started soon enough. Another advantage is versatility. Fresh, roasted, stuffed, frozen, peppers fit almost every kitchen. And because the plants continue producing over time, the harvest builds. It starts with one fruit, then several, then more than most people expect. That's why experienced gardeners don't wait until summer feels ready. They start while there's still time to build strong plants before the hottest stretch begins. At number 6, we have eggplant. Eggplant may not be every household's first choice, but in the garden, it's one of the most rewarding warm season producers when started on time. The mistake many people make is underestimating how long it takes. Eggplants love heat, but they need a solid head start to turn that heat into harvest. Planting before June means the plant can establish before temperatures peak. Another reason it matters is productivity. Once it begins fruiting, it often keeps producing steadily through summer. That makes it ideal for gardeners who want long-duration crops instead of one-time harvests. Another advantage is resilience. Established eggplants can handle summer conditions that stress more delicate vegetables. And because the fruits are substantial, each harvest feels meaningful. One or two can become an entire meal. But miss the timing, and the plant spends too much of the season just catching up. That's why the calendar matters more than most beginners realize. At number 5, we have tomato. This is the one nearly everyone waits too long to plant. And every year, many gardeners regret it. Tomatoes love warmth, but they are not instant. They need time to root deeply, grow, flower, and set fruit. If you delay until summer already feels established, you shorten the most productive part of the season. Another reason tomatoes rank here is emotional value. No crop defines an American backyard summer quite like tomatoes. Fresh sandwiches, sauces, salads, jars of preserved harvest. It becomes part of the season itself. But that only happens if the plants get enough lead time. Another reason they matter is compounding production. A healthy tomato plant can keep increasing output over time. The first fruits seem small. Then suddenly baskets begin filling. That's why experienced growers start early. They are not planting for next week. They are planting for August abundance. And the gardeners who wait until June often spend the season watching other people harvest sooner. At number 4, we have sweet potato. This is the crop many people forget until it's nearly too late. Sweet potatoes need warmth, but they also need time underground. Planting before June gives the roots enough season to size up before fall. Another reason they matter is efficiency. The roots become long storage food, and the leaves are edible too. That means one planting can provide both greens and calorie-rich tubers. Very few crops offer that combination. Another reason sweet potatoes belong near the top is resilience. Once established, they tolerate heat well and continue growing through conditions that stop many other vegetables. That makes them ideal for unpredictable summers. But they only reach that potential if started before the season advances too far. Delay them, and the roots remain smaller. Start now, and the same patch can become one of the most productive spaces in the entire garden. Timing is invisible at first. Then, harvest day proves everything. At number 3, we have okra. This is one of the few vegetables that seems to become stronger as summer gets harsher. While some plants struggle when temperatures rise, okra often thrives. That's why planting before June matters so much. It gives the plant time to establish before peak heat turns it into a production machine. Another reason okra belongs here is longevity. Once it starts producing, harvest can continue for a long stretch, as long as you keep picking. The pods grow fast, and if you miss a few days, they become oversized before you realize it. That's how quickly it moves. Another advantage is regional appeal. Across the American South, okra has been trusted for generations because it performs when summers become brutal. But more northern gardeners are discovering it too, especially as hotter summers become more common. Planting now means the plant is ready when those conditions arrive. Wait too long, and you shorten the exact period when okra performs best. That's why timing is so important. It's not just about starting, it's about syncing the plant with the season it was built for. At number 2, we have pumpkin. Most people associate pumpkins with fall, and that's exactly why they plant them too late. By the time they think about pumpkins, the best start window is already gone. Pumpkins need a long season to spread, flower, and mature fully. Planting before June gives the vines the runway they need. Another reason they matter is storage. A successful pumpkin harvest is not just decorative. It becomes food that can last well beyond summer. Roasting, soups, baking, preserved puree. One crop extends into later seasons. Another reason pumpkins belong near the top is scale. Watching a vine spread across a yard changes how the space feels. It looks alive, productive, intentional. But that growth only happens when the plant gets enough season. Miss the early window, and the fruit often remains small or fails to mature before weather shifts. Start before June, and the same plant can transform one corner of the yard into months of food. That's why experienced growers think about pumpkins long before most people even think about fall. And finally, number 1, watermelon. If there's one crop that defines summer abundance, it's watermelon. But it's also one of the easiest to miss if you wait too long. Watermelons need warmth, yes, but more importantly, they need uninterrupted time. Time to vine, flower, pollinate, and swell into fruit. Planting before June gives them the full summer they need. Another reason they rank here is emotional impact. There's something unforgettable about cutting open a watermelon you grew yourself. The weight, the color, the sweetness. It turns gardening from routine into memory. And that matters because memorable harvests keep people coming back year after year. Another reason watermelon stands out is visual payoff. One plant can spread dramatically, taking over space and turning empty ground into something that feels almost wild. But behind that spread is a clock. Delay planting too much, and the fruit may never reach its potential. Start now, and by late summer, the same patch can produce one of the most rewarding harvests in the entire garden. That's why it earns number one. Not because it's easiest, because when timed right, few crops make summer feel more complete. The lesson behind all 15 is simple. Gardening rewards action, not intention. Every spring, people plan beautiful gardens. They watch videos, save seed packets, make lists. But a list doesn't grow food. The calendar keeps moving whether anyone plants or not. And by the time many people finally start, the best window has already narrowed. That's why planting before June matters. Not because June is magical, but because it's the point where delay starts costing harvest. A few days become fewer roots, fewer flowers, smaller yields, less food. The strongest gardens are rarely built by perfect growers. They are built by people who start when the window opens instead of when motivation arrives. Because once the season moves past you, no amount of planning can bring the Planting the right vegetables before June can completely change the productivity of your garden for the rest of the season. But timing is only part of the strategy. Some crops offer an even bigger advantage. They keep producing long after the first harvest. Instead of planting over and over again, these vegetables continue growing back, providing fresh food repeatedly from the very same plants. Next, we're counting down 15 vegetables that regrow after harvest. Some can regrow from kitchen scraps. Some survive winter and return stronger. And number 4 may upset traditional gardeners because most people pull it out when they should leave it forever. While number 1 is so strange, many people think it's fake the first time they see it. At number 15, we have green onion. This may be the easiest regrowing food on the entire list, and that's exactly why it surprises so many people. Buy green onions from the store, cut off the white root end, place it in water or soil, and within days, new growth appears. Same roots, same plant. Fresh harvest again. That moment changes how people see food waste. Because something that was headed for the trash suddenly starts producing food again. Another reason green onions are powerful is frequency. They are used constantly. Soups, eggs, rice, stir-fry, noodles. That means even a small regrowing setup can save repeated grocery trips. But the deeper lesson is psychological. Green onions show that food can be restarted from what people throw away. And once that idea clicks, the entire kitchen starts looking different. Every scrap becomes potential. Every root becomes a possibility. One sunny windowsill can quietly keep producing fresh greens all season. The plant is simple, but the idea behind it changes how people think about food. At number 14, we have lettuce. Most people harvest lettuce the wrong way. They wait until the whole head forms, cut everything, and throw the plant away. But lettuce was never meant to be used only once. If you remove the outer leaves and leave the center intact, it keeps producing. That method is called cut and come again, and it transforms one small planting into weeks of food. Another reason this matters is speed. Lettuce regrows fast enough that people can see results quickly. That creates momentum. A few cuts become repeated salads, sandwich greens, fresh wraps. It turns a container into a mini food supply. But what makes lettuce powerful during uncertain times is freshness. Greens are often the first grocery items to disappear during supply issues because they spoil quickly. Homegrown lettuce removes that dependence. Fresh food becomes available whenever you need it. And because it works in containers, balconies, patios, and raised beds, almost anyone can do it. One plant, many harvests. Almost no one realizes how much food they waste by pulling it too early. At number 13, we have cilantro. Cilantro is one of the most divisive plants in the kitchen. People either love it or hate it. But in the garden, it's surprisingly useful because it can regrow repeatedly if harvested correctly. Most people cut the entire plant and remove it. But if you harvest the outer stems and leave the center, it continues producing. Another reason it matters is value. Store-bought cilantro spoils fast. You buy it, use a little, and much of it goes bad. That makes regrowing especially practical. A single container can provide fresh flavor over and over again. But there's another advantage. If allowed to flower, cilantro creates coriander seed. That means one plant can provide fresh leaves, edible flowers, and spice seed. Multiple harvests from one cycle. That makes it far more valuable than people expect. It's one of those plants that rewards patience. Cut it correctly, and it keeps giving. Let it mature, and it changes again. The same plant keeps producing different food depending on when you harvest. At number 12, we have spinach. Spinach is often treated like a single-use crop, but that misses its real strength. Harvesting the outer leaves while protecting the crown allows the plant to continue producing for weeks. That means repeated harvest from the same roots. Another reason spinach matters is nutrition. During times when food variety shrinks, nutrient-dense greens become far more important. Spinach delivers vitamins, minerals, and quick, fresh harvest from small spaces. It also performs well in cooler temperatures, which extends the growing season before summer crops take over. But the real advantage is rhythm. Spinach grows quickly enough that repeated cutting feels natural. A few leaves today, more next week, more after that. That consistency matters. It changes gardening from occasional work into an ongoing supply. And when people realize the same roots can keep feeding them without replanting, they begin to understand something bigger. Some gardens are designed for one harvest. Others are designed to keep working long after the first cut. At number 11, we have Swiss chard. Some plants earn attention because they look impressive. Others earn respect because they refuse to stop growing. Swiss chard belongs in the second category. It's one of the most dependable cut-and-come-again crops in the garden. Harvest the outer leaves, and the center keeps pushing out new growth. That cycle can continue for months. Another reason it matters is toughness. Heat that causes lettuce to bolt often barely slows Swiss chard. Cool nights that weaken summer vegetables rarely stop it either. It spans seasons better than most people expect. That makes it especially valuable for households that want consistency instead of short bursts of harvest. And unlike smaller greens, Swiss chard produces large leaves. One cutting feels substantial, enough to cook, enough to add to soups, enough to stretch a meal. The stems are edible too, which means very little goes to waste. But what makes Swiss chard stand out is reliability. When some plants fail, Swiss chard often keeps going, quietly, repeatedly. It's the kind of crop that doesn't look dramatic in spring, but by the end of the season, it's often the one still feeding you when others are gone. At number 10, we have kale. The biggest mistake people make with kale is treating it like lettuce. They cut too much, too fast, and wonder why the plant struggles. But kale is a long-term producer when harvested correctly. Remove the outer leaves and leave the growing center untouched. It keeps building upward, creating fresh leaves over and over again. Some plants can continue producing for many months from a single planting. Another reason kale is so powerful is temperature. It survives conditions that end many gardens. Frost, cold rain, even light snow. In some regions, it keeps growing when everything else has already died back. That changes how useful it becomes. It's not just another green, it's a bridge between seasons. And because the flavor often improves after frost, it can become even better late in the year. Another advantage is nutrition. In times when fresh food becomes harder to find, kale provides serious nutritional value from a small footprint. The same roots keep delivering again and again. One plant may not look like much in May, but by November, when most crops are gone and kale is still standing, people understand why experienced growers never underestimate it. At number 9, we have bok choy. This is one of those crops many people overlook simply because they don't realize how flexible it is. Bok choy can be harvested young, mature, or repeatedly depending on how you cut it. If you remove the outer leaves, the center continues growing. If you cut the base carefully, some varieties can regrow from the same crown. That means one plant can keep feeding you longer than expected. Another reason bok choy matters is speed. It grows fast. That creates visible progress quickly, which keeps people motivated. And because it works in containers, raised beds, or compact spaces, it fits almost any home setup. But there's another layer. Bok choy handles cooler weather better than many warm season crops, which makes it valuable during seasonal transitions. Fresh stir-fries, soups, sautéed greens, all from the same roots. It's not usually the first crop people think of for repeated harvest. But once they try it, many realize they were harvesting it the wrong way all along. And that's a common theme in gardening. Sometimes the plant was never the problem. The harvest method was. At number 8, we have celery. If there's one kitchen scrap that surprises people the most, it may be celery. Cut off the base, place it in shallow water, and within days, new leaves begin emerging from the center. What looked like waste suddenly starts growing again. That alone makes it fascinating, but the real value is what it teaches. Because celery shows that the end of a harvest is often not the end of the plant. Another reason it belongs here is versatility. Celery is used in soups, stocks, salads, sauces, and countless everyday meals. Having it regrow at home turns scraps into convenience. But unlike some fast regrow demonstrations online, celery rewards patience. It starts slowly, then gradually builds into a larger plant when transferred into soil. That process reveals something important. Regrowing is not magic. It's biology. The roots and crown are still alive, waiting for conditions to return. Once they do, the plant resumes. That's why celery is such a powerful example. It turns a kitchen habit into a gardening lesson. And after watching celery regrow from what used to be trash, many people never throw the base away again. At number 7, we have leek. Most people think of leeks as a one-time harvest. Pull them out, trim them, cook them, and that's the end. But the base tells a different story. If the root end is left intact and replanted, leeks often begin growing again. Slowly at first, then steadily. That makes them one of the most underrated regrowing vegetables in the garden. Another reason leeks matter is patience. They don't regrow overnight like green onions, and that's exactly why many people quit too soon. But those who wait discover something useful. The same root system can continue producing new shoots that eventually become another harvest. And because leeks add depth to soups, roasted dishes, and stocks, they're more valuable than many people realize. In difficult times, flavorful ingredients matter because they make basic meals feel complete. But the deeper lesson is this: some of the best regrowing crops are not dramatic at first. They reward the people who understand delayed return. Leeks teach that lesson perfectly. The part most households throw away can quietly become the next harvest. And once that idea sinks in, a grocery trip starts looking less like shopping and more like collecting planting material. At number 6, we have asparagus. This is where regrowing stops being a trick and becomes a long-term system. Because asparagus is not just something that regrows once. It comes back every single year. Same roots, same bed, new harvest. That changes everything. The trade-off is patience. Asparagus takes time to establish, and many people avoid it because they want faster results. But once mature, it can produce for a decade or more. Some beds continue far longer. Another reason asparagus matters is timing. It arrives in early spring when many gardens are barely waking up. That means fresh food before most crops are even planted. And because it returns without needing replanting, it becomes one of the most reliable producers in the garden. This is why experienced growers often treat asparagus as an investment. It's not planted for this month. It's planted for years. One decision keeps paying back. And in a world where most food systems depend on constant buying, A plant that returns every spring without being asked becomes something far more valuable than a vegetable. It becomes infrastructure. At number 5, we have sorrel. Most people in America have never grown sorrel, which is exactly why it surprises so many first-time gardeners. Once established, sorrel behaves like it has no intention of leaving. Harvest the leaves and more appear. Leave the roots alone, and it often returns year after year. That makes it one of the easiest perennial greens to keep harvesting from the same plant. Another reason sorrel matters is timing. It often wakes up very early in the season, producing leaves when many other crops are still dormant. That means food from the garden before most people think the season has even started. The flavor is bright, slightly lemony, and unlike most common greens. That makes it valuable not just as food, but as variety. During repetitive seasons of eating, variety keeps meals sustainable. But the real surprise is how little care it needs once established. Sorrel teaches a simple lesson. Some plants are not meant to be restarted every year. They are meant to stay. The roots remain, and the harvest returns almost on its own. That kind of crop changes how people think about effort. Less planting, more harvesting. At number 4, we have rhubarb. This is the controversial one. Because many people grow rhubarb like it's a seasonal novelty, harvest it once, enjoy a pie, and forget about it. But the truth is, rhubarb is one of the longest-term producers in a home garden. Once established, the same crown can return year after year for decades. Some family gardens are still harvesting from plants older than the people eating them. That alone makes it remarkable. Another reason rhubarb matters is consistency. It often emerges early in spring, producing before many warm season crops are even planted. That early harvest becomes valuable when fresh food is limited. But there's another reason I placed it here. Rhubarb forces people to think differently about time. Most annual vegetables demand restarting. Rhubarb demands patience once, then rewards that decision for years. The same roots keep building harvest after harvest. And because it becomes a permanent part of the landscape, it turns a garden into something more stable. A food source that survives seasons, neglect, and changing routines. Many people pull out plants too soon. Rhubarb teaches the opposite. Leave the roots. Let time work for you. At number 3, we have mint. If there's one plant that teaches the true meaning of regrowth, it's mint. Because once established, many gardeners spend more time trying to control it than trying to grow it. Cut it back, and it returns. Pull stems, and new shoots appear. Leave roots in the soil, and it spreads in directions you didn't expect. That persistence makes it incredibly useful. Fresh tea, seasoning, sauces, salads, mint keeps producing far beyond what one small planting suggests. Another reason it matters is resilience. It tolerates neglect surprisingly well. Miss a watering, forget to harvest for a while, let the stems die back, and the roots often continue anyway. That's rare. Most plants punish neglect. Mint often ignores it. But what makes mint valuable is not just abundance, it's predictability. When the weather shifts, when routines get busy, When other plants struggle, mint often keeps returning. And that teaches a powerful lesson. Some crops are not about one perfect season. They are about staying in your system year after year. Once the roots are there, the harvest becomes almost inevitable. That's why experienced growers often plant mint in containers. Not to help it grow, but to keep it from taking over everything around it. A plant that hard to stop deserves respect. At number 2, we have Jerusalem artichoke. Skip to the end if you want, but don't skip this one. Because this plant doesn't just regrow, it often multiplies without permission. Plant a few tubers, harvest most of them, and if even a small piece remains underground, there's a good chance it returns next season. That makes it one of the most persistent food crops you can grow. Another reason it matters is where it stores food, underground. The garden itself becomes the pantry. You don't need to harvest everything at once. Tubers can stay in the soil and be dug when needed. That changes how storage works. It keeps food alive until the day you want it. Another reason it stands out is resilience. It handles cold, survives neglect, and often grows taller and stronger each year. Many gardeners plant it once and spend years managing it after that. That's not failure. That's proof of how determined the plant is. In a world where most vegetables require planning, seed ordering, timing, and repeated labor, Jerusalem artichokes operate differently. Plant once, disturb the roots, and they often keep coming back whether you planned for it or not. And finally, number 1, walking onion. This may be one of the strangest food plants most people have never seen. It's called a walking onion because it appears to move. The plant grows normally at first, but instead of only producing underground bulbs, it creates clusters of baby onions at the top of the stalk. As those become heavier, the stalk bends. The top touches the ground. The baby bulbs root where they land, and a new plant begins. That's how it walks across a garden. One plant slowly creates the next generation by moving itself. That makes it one of the most extraordinary regrowing crops for any family. Another reason it matters is reliability. You harvest the bulbs below, you harvest the top sets above, and still the plant often returns. It keeps multiplying with minimal help. Some gardeners maintain the same patch for decades. The onions simply keep expanding. That is why I saved it for number 1, because it completely changes what people expect from food. Most crops need us to continue planting them. Walking onions begin planting themselves. The harvest continues, the patch expands, and over time, the original planting becomes almost impossible to trace. That is not just regrowth. That is self-propagation. And once people see it, they understand why older generations treated certain crops almost like inheritance. What all 15 reveal is something most people never notice. We are taught to think food ends at harvest. Pull the plant, throw away the scraps, start over next season. But nature often works differently. Roots remain alive. Crowns keep growing. Shoots return from what looked finished. The harvest is not always the end. Sometimes it's only the first cut. And once you build a garden around crops like that, everything changes. Effort drops. Harvest increases. Waste disappears. One bed becomes multiple seasons. One plant becomes years. The smartest gardeners are not always the ones planting more. Often, they're the ones learning which plants refuse to stop. Because once food starts coming back on its own, the garden stops being a project. It becomes something much more powerful. A system that keeps feeding you long after the first harvest is gone.